welcome to you all for the last finance meeting of this council. This appears to be quite a bit of the agenda, but I don't think it's that bad when we get into it. So item 1, apologies for absence.
Apologies received from Councillor Barry.
Item 2, the minutes of the last meeting on 15th April. Been through that, there's a slight minor point on F124, which is the budget recommendations, but they are covered later on in this meeting. So I don't see any other questions. If not, I would like to propose them to record. Members are reminded of the requirement to disclose any interest in relation to items on the agenda when these are discussed. Item 4, Councillor was one for the internal control report. In November 24th, we agreed that we should have an independent councillor looking at some of the bank statements and various things. And it was Councillor Morgan volunteered. Would you like to say a few words on that?
No, I think it's a useful thing to do. I noticed that Trevor Brown, the auditor, did make reference to it and seemed to be very pleased we were doing it. I think we do it every 3 months. It takes about an hour. There's nothing more to add other than I did a full check.
Okay. Item 5, risk assessment. We've got to you all have a copy of the current risk assessment. It some further discussion on item 13 actually, but for this year we've got to agree that it's all in order. Would anybody like?
No, this is the risk assessment that has changed format.
Oh, sorry, I do
And we
apologise.
haven't quite finished the document for this meeting.
Start again. I've jumped the gun. Remember earlier in the year we decided to change our risk assessment fairly dramatically, and it was always the intention to do that during the course of the year. We haven't done that. So the recommendation's got to be that it's a priority for the next meeting, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's all, if you look, it's all very colourful. It's red, isn't it? Red, amber, and
It's
orange.
got red, green, and orange.
You did go through it. You thought with it.
You gave me a different one to put the format of red, greens, and oranges, which is what I'm working on, but I haven't quite finished it. Basically.
Which makes a lot of sense. The format, but it's. Sorry, that's item 6. I'll try again. Asset register. You've got a copy of that. That's relevant to. We've got to agree that, as I say, in item 13, we're going to look at that and reformat it as well. But we've got to agree the one that we have at the moment, if that's okay. There's all of this, without jumping the gun, the asset register is based on insurance values and other things and historic values, and that's not appropriate. But at the moment, it's what we've got and it's what we have to agree to, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
The end of year accounts. If just let us say, in our introduction, that at the beginning of the year, if you remember, we decided to try and complete the year-end accounts in this council's term without straying into the incoming financial. So last time we didn't finish till June, so it was transferred from council to council effectively. So I'm pleased to say that this year we have achieved that, and it's all been duly reported and so on. And in addition, the internal auditor has been and looked at the figures, produced a draft report and then a final report. So if it's all in agreement, everything is absolutely bang up to date, which means that the new committee can start with a clean sheet and not get bogged down with AGARs and all this sort of stuff. So I think that's good effort. And I would like to thank Tracy. It is quite stressful. There's box files and all sorts of things to put together. So it has been done in bang on time. So that's Thank you, Tracy, for that.
Thank you. Thank you for your assistance, both of you.
Just handed around it, sorry it was at last minute, but try to get it right, to work with the internal report, the internal audit report. So there's just one sheet, the position. In the past, we've tracked income and expenditure over every month through the year. And the last month, we tried to give an update on what we thought the position would be, and that was pretty accurate. So rather than go through all that again, come from a different angle this time, so just thought I might talk briefly about reserves. The whole point was, the strategy was, if you remember, the reserves had been steadily falling. At the end of last year, we managed to rescue the situation a little bit. So it was actually a balanced budget, apart from 8,000, which was a historic figure. But it was, operationally, it was nearly balanced. And the idea was to start bringing it up and getting it into the green. So that was the strategy. So just a few figures, don't want to sort of leave it too much, but so if we look at the year-end position, the opening at the beginning of, again getting to this year, last year, whatever, at the beginning of 24-25, we had £121,313. We have now closed at 171,640. So the difference between the two is 50,000. So we've increased our fortunes by 50,000 this year. The reason for that, first of all, we've got to deduct some advanced receipts that we used to do at the boat park. So if you look at up to the end of March, we'd already collected nearly £10,000 in boat park money, but that's for this year because we're renting the space from April onwards. So we shouldn't confuse it with that. So if we take that out, we've actually increased the reserves by 40,514. Just so that you know what actually happened, which we sort of hinted at last time. You remember we're trying to project we're projecting an increase of 25,000. We wanted the reserve to go 25 to start getting to sort of safer territory. So we've achieved that, and we've in addition made a further £15,514. And that, again, just to remind you, on the left-hand side, it was the sales division, as we call it, did quite well. And by the way, it can do an awful lot more. We had interest payments of nearly £3,000, which is a help. The car parking gave us a big boost because the sun came out in the summer, and we did rather well at the car park. And if I could just say on that point, so this year's budget isn't based on this higher level. It resets back to where it was on the basis we might look at the sun might not come out. And I would just like to add, and it should be remembered, I think, that I've spoken to Terry, and explained to Terry that you don't have to spend your budget to keep it. In fact, which so many organisations do. If you don't spend your money, you don't get next year. Well, I've said to Terry, he didn't spend it, he helped the cause, and he doesn't, but the budget goes back to where it was, plus inflation actually. So he doesn't, which I think is important.
Totally concur with that.
We also got a bit of input from the Football Association for the rec, and by the way, there's a lot more to come there as well, I think. We didn't get quite what we thought for various reasons, but that's well worth having a close look at. And then, of course, in the budget, we didn't have the Harbour Commissioner's jetty lease, and we received our first payment, so that all helps. So they were pluses. The minuses were really the vehicle. If you remember, we bought a vehicle on a different arrangement. So I'm now pleased to say that we now own a third of a vehicle that we otherwise wouldn't. But we did have to pay more for that in terms of discharges, but that's okay. And then there was also some write-offs. There was the bowling club and the smack talk.
Yeah.
So all of them have been covered, and we've ended up with 15,000 more than we anticipated. So that's how it all worked, basically. Just jumping forward to this year, 25-26, what I'm suggesting is that the closing reserve of 171,640, we take 10,000 from that and earmark that. So the reserve is, instead of being 171,000 carried forward, it's 161,000, but it's got 10,000 of earmarked reserves. And the idea of the earmarked reserve is to spend that money willy-nilly to improve financial efficiency. So it's not to prop up an otherwise ailing budget, it's there to try and make the whole thing better in the future, which I think is quite important. Then if you look at the budget we've agreed for this year, we're hoping to project an increase of 20,000. So we take the 161,000 carried forward, forget the 10,000, that's brilliantly spent. Sensibly, one would hope. £20,000 if we hit the targets. So we're now at 181,000 at the end of this year. And that puts us well into green. It equates. Actually, that's the book about the topographical survey.
You want to speak to it?
So I'm with it today. Yeah, so that if we get to the end of this year, as we think, then it'll go to over 8 months of security.
Yeah, can I just remind us, what was the recommended level of reserve? I know we did discuss it a couple of years ago where we should be at. I think it was about the 160, 180.
Yeah. If we get to 9 months, there's lots of different versions.
Yeah.
If we get to 9 months, that would be considered, we are the, sort of in the local
green.
council. Yeah.
So
we're in the green now,
right.
but we're going into the safe green.
Okay.
So 9 months would be considered very good. And we're at
I've just worked it out, if we hit what you just said, the extra 20,000 this year, that will put us over 9 months.
Yeah.
If we take monthly expenditure multiplied by 9.
And that's what we should try and strive for.
Yeah. We're sort of slightly unusual. If you look at how the work is out or recommended, we're slightly different because we have quite a high commercial input with the leases and so on.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where we are, if that makes sense. The £10,000 is sort of unallocated, except it's for efficiency. And I think marketing, for example, just as a few examples, if you don't mind me giving my views. If you look at external exhibitions, there's vast scope for improvement, but we're start marketing outside the area. And for two reasons. One is it gives a kind of income, but it adds huge prosperity to the town.
Yes.
So that's a key area, it's a double whammy. And then there's cost cutting, which is definitely opportunity there.
Sorry, just one question. We know we've got to do some landlord improvements on the playground.
Yeah.
Is that £10,000 part of that, or is that something separate?
No, that's all of that's budgeted. This is purely, it's just to look at ways of making improving efficiency. So, for example, we might choose to improve the intelligence of the council with a bit of AI, or maybe it's human.
Twofold.
So there's £10,000 and it is unallocated apart from efficiency. And all I would say, without sounding like Donald Trump, I would just say spend, baby, spend.
Oh, I've never heard these words in case.
Not for a few years.
That's definitely come from the chairman of finance on his last meeting. Didn't say the first meeting, did he?
No.
Can you add prudently to the end of that?
That's why I wanted to establish what the reserve should be. Yeah, no.
So does that make sense, hopefully?
Well, it gives the council an exciting future to look for initiatives that produce more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few things, there's a bit of wriggle room in the budgets coming up, and there's things like, you probably noticed that there's been no, the town guide hasn't appeared in these accounts because they're getting off the block. So this year we'll have 2 lots of town guide profit, and there's all sorts of things like that that we can look all helps. So then if we, just our attentions to the auditor's internal audit report, it's 16 pages long, so, and only arrived yesterday, so we can't expect people to look at it. If I could just very, very briefly summarise it, we did quite well on budgets and numbers and reserves and all those sort of things. And generally, I think it was a good report in our favour. We did get marked down, however, on our risk assessment and statement of internal control, which this internal auditor quite right said you should be doing through the term, through the year, and we didn't. If I can be slightly defensive, there was a working party set up to look at these things, but I think you'd all agree there seems to be a plethora of working parties this year, so there's a little bit defensive in mitigation, but it should be done. And we also were reminded that we need a strategic plan, which we haven't got. So those really ought to be looked at as a priority in the third term. I don't know whether I have to recommend that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also standing orders and financial regulations review.
Can I make a suggestion that we recommend that the main committee has a standing order point about reviewing a policy? So if we do one a month, it's much better than doing 6 or 12 at a go.
That's a very good idea.
And I think that's actually reflected in the report. Says that's quite common to do one a month.
Yeah, I think my recommendation, sort of the overseeing recommendation, would be to say that we need to look at the internal auditor's report and carry out all recommendations therein,
Yes.
because it's all in there.
Yes.
So, and it's quite clear, and it's, so if we recommend that as a priority. Go forward.
Can I just add to that? The policy on internal audit lists out his recommendations from last year, some of which we haven't done, I don't think. But when we get to that, I think he said what we should do is take his recommendations and put it in that policy. So that's maybe one of the first policies we do.
It's, no, he's just summarised the whole situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely can.
We just put his recommendation in the internal policy.
Yeah.
Audit policy.
So then you should have received income and expenditure document and also the balance sheet. And by the way, without going on about Trevor's report, all of these, it's all in sync. These reports, so I don't know if you read them, they're put in a slightly different format, the way we've been monitoring throughout the year, and include one-off monies and the various recharges and that sort of thing. Having said that,
That 106 money received.
so if you look at the way that we've been looking at over the months, that's operational finance. If you look at the figures on these income and expenditure, that it's all of that, but it also includes the 106 money coming in and the 106 money going out, and also the neighbourhood plan money going in and out, and the recharge from the play centre and those sort of things.
Yeah, actual money's going in, but actually going out. That's right.
And it's been written in a slightly different way because of the computer, and I think we should get everything in sync as well, but it reflects what we've been talking about all year round. So, I don't know if there's any queries, but otherwise, again, I'd like to propose that it's accepted as a set of year-end accounts. Before we get to the next bit, which I don't really understand, the other thing, if we could just sort of say that, just my observations, that if we look at what we've been doing, leases and rents and all the rest of it, I think we do have to look, certainly when it comes to the leases and so on, we've got to look at those slightly separately. You know, there's a lot of, we're obligated to our tenants in certain ways, and I think that can be missed if we're not careful. So, you know, we know particularly from well, some of the leases, as you know, which have become a bit difficult, we've got to make sure that we're on top of all of this. It's not a big deal, and we're not saying we're not on top of it, but I think we should restructure it a bit and have some sort of way of looking at the leases particularly, without getting too muddled up with the normal council business. So that would be my view of that. I don't know whether that's.
What are you actually suggesting? That it should be looked at in 12 months or?
I was going to make a recommendation that this committee had a subcommittee that looked after business leases, you know, and anything to do with, because this committee and also the FCA gets drowned in arguments about leases and technical bits and who said what. And I think maybe that should be taken out.
Do a subcommittee.
It dilutes the importance of this meeting.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's been going on for too long now. The name of this statutory committee is the Finance and Property Committee.
Yeah.
And leases should come under this.
Yeah.
And if it's a working group, that's good.
We used to do it, Ian Block and I did it actually, where we also kept a diary, our own diary. Ian and I started going through leases then, but we knew instantly when they were coming up for renewal 6 months before we knew they were going to run out. We'd already marked it into our diaries, so we started working on it that way. But because, you know, as Chris says, before you know it, another one's come to an end and you just lose track on so many, but.
Well, I think also the other important thing, having had the Havens experience, is monitoring what we're getting out.
Yeah, and it also, well, actually it allows our people, our residents, if you like, to sort of buy into it as well,
Yeah.
so that they're up to date with it, because you know, councils keep changing, and that kind of committee that you've just proposed, Chris, would be a longer term type of committee.
Well, leases are longer term as well, aren't they? They're not
Yeah.
things that need to
I mean,
be
that's
done
a
every
real-
year.
real
It's like-
issue.
Nothing should be done with knee-jerk reaction. We should be
No.
well in advance of any
Exactly.
action.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Well, the other thing I'm concerned about, and Dave's dead right, we as a landlord have certain responsibilities,
Correct.
and really, we're
We've
quite
been a bit
listed.
wobbly.
Well, I mean, there's still asbestos in a playgroups area, you know, that's really not good enough for a council.
So there's some legal requirements we should keep on top of, and then there's some technical ones, electrical test certificates, all those sort of things. So we do have obligations, and I just think it blocks up the FCA particularly, which is there for a different purpose.
Yeah.
So something along those lines, I think, should be considered. If that's and that's just an observation, really.
You made the recommendation.
I think that's a
Can we make
recommendation.
it as a
Yeah,
recommendation
I'd
again?
like to propose it, or second it if you're proposing it, Chair.
I don't mind proposing it either, so.
Okay, well, actually, I think Chris has proposed.
Well,
Let's all
doesn't
propose.
matter, there's
Let's
all
propose.
propose.
Let's propose it.
We all agree.
And the subcommittee, I think, will be a subcommittee, so it doesn't have to, does it just have to be people that are on the finance committee, or can it be anything?
I think it's a good thing that it's finance because of the fact that it's a small committee.
I wasn't sure technically, if it's a subcommittee, it has to be the finance anyway.
Well, it is a statutory committee, isn't it, finance? So
And it can court countries next.
I propose that we have a subcommittee that just deals with leases. Well, just let's make it commercial.
Commercial.
The commercial elements of the business, so it covers jetties as well, I suppose.
That was it.
Yeah.
Linked.
Well, yeah. Could I just ask a technical question, Dave? On the, one thing I've got lost with it is I've got the income and expenditure account, and then I've got a consolidated bank balance sheet.
Yeah.
And on the balance sheet is none of the assets. Or certainly not the value of the assets. And I didn't quite understand how that could be a balance sheet with no assets.
It can't, they do, having said that, all the assets come back into the AGAR.
yeah,
I think it's a peculiarity of local authority accounting. But,
Okay.
so it all comes together in the next thing we deal with. Why that is the case, but that is seems to
I'll
be.
ask Trevor, it's all right.
It is the context.
Can I just say on the, on this lease, should town clerk be on there as well?
Oh, yeah, I would, essentially,
Yeah.
because it's actually, town clerk holds the legal liability.
Exactly.
As the town clerk should be advising the council as well, of our position and what we should be doing.
Yeah, I think like I keep saying, but just needs to little think about what's the terms of reference and what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
You know, fairly clearly, so there's no overlap, otherwise it
Yeah.
becomes a bit distorted. Right, we've started waters for me, now we're into item 8, is the AGAR returns. And section 1, we have to make sure that we've all got everything right before we get to the next section, which is the number. So, Tracy, do we have to, we look through each one of these in
Yep.
turn?
Yes, please.
We are helped again by the internal auditor, who's, as he put in his report, he's not happy with box
Fine.
5. He is with the rest. So if we have to go through them bit by bit, we'll put in place arrangements for effective financial management during the year and preparation of the accounting statements. Are we happy with that?
Yeah.
We maintain adequate system internal control, including measures designed to prevent fraud and corruption, and reviewed its effectiveness.
Yes, he was happy with that, yeah.
We took all reasonable steps to assure ourselves that there are no matters of actual or potential non-compliance with laws, regulations, or practices that could have a significant financial effect on the ability of this authority to conduct its business or manage its finances. Four, we provided proper opportunity during the year for the exercise of the electors' rights in accordance with the requirements of the accounts and audit regulations.
Yeah, they've nodded.
Yeah.
Five, we carried out an assessment of the risks facing this authority and took appropriate steps to manage those risks, including the introduction of internal controls and or external insurance cover where required.
This is what he's worried about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to take no on.
So I think we've got to do it now.
It's not big though, is it? I mean, it's not big.
No.
And there's something, again,
Sorry, there's part of it we've done, haven't we? We've looked at all the risks, when you go back a year ago,
Well,
The
we sat in the room, the
situation-
three of us went through it, but I can't remember when that
I
was.
don't think it was structured, was it?
a year ago, then we have started to look at the risks and.
We've looked at it, but I think it just got stalled. I don't think it's a big thing.
we tried to reformat the whole thing for good reason,
Yeah,
instead of just
We should have
Signing.
ratified it, though,
No,
And-
it's not.
So we just have to, in future, diarise it as for a specific meeting once a year.
I mean, we've got the, we changed all the bank accounts, make sure that we comply and all sorts of things, so we did some things, but anyway, we didn't do it comprehensively, and therefore,
I'm not sure, it does actually say that we can provide explanations.
Yeah.
yeah, well,
And
well, can we not say we're in the middle of working through it at the
And a
moment?
very
It's just not
simple
completed.
explanation.
I think we should-
I think we'll be fine.
I think we should invite the town clerk perhaps to, have you got,
Well, when I spoke with Trevor about this last week, he did make a comment that we should maybe say something along the lines of due to the pressing commitments, the formality of agreeing the internal control and risk assessment will not take place until 25/26 year. These documents will be kept under review and the risk assessment will be reviewed. during the
Actually,
year.
I wrote an internal control policy, which we approved this year.
Yeah, this is mainly on the risk assessment.
So, well, yeah,
And,
well, I was
and,
making,
and the councillor internal controls that we agreed in November
Oh,
with
okay.
councillor Morgan that didn't take place till April.
So basically, we could just basically put that we're still in the middle of,
We're doing it.
we're doing it, but we just haven't completed it.
We're on it.
and within box 5, there's also mention of the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Because that's considered, if you're not a strategic plan, then therefore that's a risk. So, we just haven't answered comprehensively as the,
But I agree with what Tracy's got worded there then from the internal
Yeah.
auditor.
What does that encompass?
That was debated as the
Well-
a 2 and a 4 year strategy for
Yeah.
the
What does
council.
it cover?
According to the rule book, you need a 3 to 5 year plan
Yeah.
covering project, capital expenditure.
And it's aspirations of council or? Everything.
Yeah, I think it would be, it's sort of a business plan, isn't it, really? And it's saying what you can do, what you'd like to do, and,
But I would have thought we'd started to cover that as well,
Didn't
with
we
the
start?
boat park and
Yeah.
the jetty and.
Can I suggest, why don't we call a meeting when we get the answers to the survey and use that as the basis?
As a basis to
That's a good idea.
start, that's a very good.
And it gives us justification
Yeah.
then as
But
well.
I would have thought we could also widen that out to find out what other people think the council should be trying to do and achieve. On their
I'll tell you what,
behalf.
I might do a search and see what West Mersey or somebody else,
Yeah,
is it West Mersey or Mersey?
Mersey's a good,
Yeah, so see what their strategic plan is.
and we've also added into that the financial strategic plan, which we just talked about actually, but where we're trying to get to and whether we're in the safe area.
that's quite exciting. Isn't it?
I mean, I think we're well on, it's just that it's not something.
Well, the waterside development thing was part of it as well, isn't it?
Oh, very much.
Didn't Councillor Barry start the strategic plan?
Yeah, you
You
did.
did,
yeah,
Yeah,
years
and
ago.
that's never been carried on.
It was never ratified. The trouble is we keep doing these things, so we don't
Well,
follow.
he did a 5-year plan, didn't he? I thought he was meant to be updating it all. I don't know.
but at least I think,
Action plan, actions by age.
there's one thing, you get last year's plan out and change the date, but I think we're trying to do it properly, aren't we?
Yeah.
Update.
And I think we should, keep our head high. really. Okay then, so that's unfortunate, but, we are where we are. 6, we maintain throughout the year an adequate and effective system of internal audit of the accounting records and control system. So that's a definite. We took appropriate action on all matters raised in reports from internal and external audit.
Yeah.
8, we consider whether any litigation liabilities or commitments, events or transactions occurring either during or after the year end have a financial impact on this authority and where appropriate have included them in the accounting statements. Which,
Can I did want to bring this one up because if you remember, Dave, in our discussions about the MMO, we were going to set aside what
Yeah.
we were going to know. I mean, is that what's called by that?
yeah, I spoke to Trevor, he said that it has been noted in the minutes of the previous meeting.
So,
It's
so
just
we can
been
tick
noted.
that then, because
We
we've
tick
done
it.
it, yeah.
We've done it, yeah.
Yeah.
But hopefully that won't happen.
Well, it won't happen, yeah, hopefully it won't happen.
9, final item, trust funds including charitable, in our capacity as the sole managing trustee, we discharged our accountability responsibilities for the fund's assets, including financial reporting, and if required, independent examination of audit.
Not applicable?
Not applicable, it doesn't apply.
What about Springmead Trust?
I was wondering about that, but I don't think it applies to that, does it?
No, we don't have it.
Well,
We don't have it.
in the Springmead Trust, the trust regulations, we are the, because we have 5 members, we are the controlling entity, it says that on there. But I mean, do they have their accounts audited?
They should do. But I think they're a bit behind.
Can we check, I think, sorry,
It's
I forgot
very
this,
steady.
but
It's very steady in here for that.
no, it's mentioned in the report, in the auditor's report. I think, do you mind if we just check that? I think it is a yes. But it's mentioned, so whichever it is.
Yes.
So that's okay. Wasn't too bad. That's section 1. Is that okay? Section 2. Have to read these numbers out?
No, just to agree the figures, they're obviously
Yeah.
off the system, with box 9 being off the asset register. So yeah, it's just to agree the figures, and then obviously any comments for 11A and 11B boxes.
So the numbers have just been abstracted from the figures and endorsed by Trevor.
Yep.
And for some reason, the fixed assets appear now as 2.7 million.
Yeah. That might change next year.
Yeah.
Might,
But we do that throughout the year, and then that forms part of the end of year for
Yeah,
next
no,
year.
that's what-
Yeah,
I spoke to Trevor about it.
Yeah.
He told me that.
11A, disclosure note with trust funds including charity. Followed by disclosure note with trust funds including charity. I think we need some assistance here, Tracy.
but we're not responsible for managing trust funds or assets. The figures in the accounting statements above exclude any trust transactions. So I would say the first one is right, the second one is yes.
Yeah, I would agree.
Agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have with that?
Yes.
Are we ticking yes on mine?
The figures in the accounting statements above exclude any trust transactions. Yeah, there's no trust transactions in there. This is
No, I'm
accounting.
sorry, on 11A, does that not relate then back to section 1.9? No?
11A relate to what, sorry?
Because we're saying, council was act as a sole trust, okay, we're moving on.
Oh, you're on the other statement.
Mind if we check that one out?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's a technical matter.
Yeah.
We'll check that and then. Okay, are we all happy with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. We'll check that with Trent.
Yeah.
Then item 10 is really the whole set of notes on the additional paperwork which you need to have sight of. I don't know if there's any, rather go through it, I don't know if anybody's got any issues regarding that. It's just, it's all sort of factual information.
Can I just say that on the first item, dates planned for the provision of exercise of public rights, I've gone with what the external auditor suggests, which is the 3rd of June to the 14th of July, with the notice being placed on Monday the 2nd of June. So we can't get that wrong. And you will notice that the internal auditor's report is in there on his sheet from the AGAR. And he has ticked a lot applicable actually for trust funds.
Is it?
Yeah, if you look at, and your internal audit report as well. Don't do one.
I'll follow him then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
yeah.
that, yeah.
He
We
has
do.
ticked a lot of people.
Yeah, we'll check that out just. So the additional paperwork, it is factual, and
Yeah.
so out of courtesy, it isn't saying. Can we go on to 11?
Examining the accounts, yes, I think that's me. So due to the year end, it's not been possible to provide the accounts for April, and these will be provided at the next meeting, together with May's. And if I could have two councillors to authorise 20 payments in the sum of £15,555, please.
I can do that if you like.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Can I, just while at that point, Dave and I are the two authorisers of the unitary account. And I don't think it's appropriate that I'm one of them, or it's only me. So somebody should also become one to, because I'm doing it regularly, really. So I think, yeah, because it's chair of the finance committee. So can we get an action? You have to have,
Yeah.
you have to register, she has to register you.
Yeah.
And
I think that needs to be done quite quickly.
and on the same note, we'll have to change your first report, but you can't do that anymore.
No.
So we'll have to, and you know that.
worth, Tracy, having the current authorised signatories for the main bank account? We don't use the main bank account anymore, do we, Barclays?
Well, we do, all payments come out
And
in.
delete it.
And further appointment of internal auditor. Trevor Brown has said he would be willing to serve another year if we should so choose.
I'm definitely proposing.
Second that.
All our hands will go up on that one.
I think you've done a great job.
And a very reasonable price.
Yeah.
No, he's good.
Yeah, good
Yeah,
price.
He's
definitely
got,
agree.
Good catch.
He's got huge experience of big councils, little councils, charities. And
So he's the guy that audits the auditors. Checks the auditors.
My God.
Yeah, good catch that.
Okay, and 13, asset valuation policy. That's, there's a meeting with Trevor Brown and Chris myself about how we're going to rejig the asset valuation. And I think Chris has prepared a note. Does he want to run through that?
It's one of the things that's slightly concerning is that the asset registers were all over the place to start off with. And really, because they're non-disposable playing fields, is there really a value? So after a discussion, we decided to mark all of those as zero, which will take quite a considerable chunk out of here. And then the ones that were leased, so the wreck we won't value at all, but the leases on the wreck we will value at 10 times their annual lease base, which would go for the Haven as well, places like that. And on equipment, we were valuing it at the price that it would be to buy it new, which meant that every year the equipment we hold was increasing in value rather than decreasing in value because you'd be writing a bit off every year. So we've said as a compromise to that, we'll just put it in at the value we paid for it. So those three things together will take that number down considerably, but at least it will be a real value.
Should you devalue it each year?
You can, according to Trevor, you can do what you like, but the external auditors might come down and say what's going on if they see it. But if you explain that you've reassessed your valuation method, they'll let it go this year, so it'll be coming down. But if you bounce it around each year, it tends to come down
Well,
and see
equipment
what's going
never
on.
gains in value,
Well,
does it?
that's
Each year, you know, every year mine decreases and, yeah.
Write it down.
I guess for that asset valuation, that doesn't affect our insurance, because the insurance valuation could be different, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, remember a lot of the insurance for the technical stuff will be replaced by the new.
Yeah.
So although the asset is only worth £10, if it costs £100 to pay, you're paying a premium for £100.
I mean, more the public spaces like Walson's playground, if suddenly a big hole came in there.
Yeah, I think,
Valued at a zero.
yeah. I don't think us valuing it at zero is anything to do with the insurance, because things like that is a third party liability, isn't it?
Yeah, just
The
gonna say, it's your
chances of
public
somebody-
liability that
Yeah.
costs, isn't it?
You find, from what I heard of talking to one insurance agent about something completely different, but on public areas, the main insurance is the third party liability. I mean, the grass field isn't going to burn down, is it?
I mean, some councils denote their common spaces and actually have them registered as common land. Although it might be an ownership, which means that the council can never sell them, and they're kept for the public and always as common.
We do have a couple.
That's
well,
great.
The screen's common though.
No, it's registered to us.
Yeah, yeah, but it is.
Is registered as a common land.
But you couldn't believe
Well,
it.
streets, common
Church
land.
are doing
I was warned away from that, and simply because if you ever want to trim the corner, put something across it, you know, because it's common land, you have to go through God knows what hoops.
that. You do.
Whereas if you wanted to lay electrical cable in Hurst Green so they could have their music festival, you'd have to go through hoops to get it through common land, but if you own it,
I think common land has got a sort of saying that it's common land, but handed to the local council to protect
yeah.
or something.
The-
I might have that in one of the old history.
St Joseph is the mark to take from this, and the problems that we've had with the beach down in St Joseph.
yeah.
On a committee that I sit down with there, because the beach is owned by Bourne Leisure.
Right.
Bourne Leisure cannot turn around and say, yes, you can turn that into a car park because of the laws of common land.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it's going to say to me, we'll be careful. Colin.
Yeah, okay. But the only reason you bring it up is because there could be in the future a set of councillors who come on with a very different viewpoint.
Yeah.
And it just
It's protected, isn't it?
protecting that land forevermore.
You can, I think you'll find that in
that's-
common land, you can
so-
put stuff in there that allows you, but it's a big thing. The clerk at St Osyth, Tracy, is really up on common land.
There's houses.
Yeah.
Might be worth looking at it anyway.
Yeah, he's really, I mean, he's had to do a lot of work to.
Oh, yeah, we'll chat then.
Okay, any other business?
You've done very well there.
Well done.
No, they'll get the turn. Is there any questions from the gallery, please?
Just the other day,
Toilets?
this meeting, the tap on boat park, is that working?
It is working.
Thank you.
And the lights are going to be put on very soon as well.
Sorry.
The night time.
Sorry, can I re-adjourn the meeting, restart the meeting? I think we should know, and I don't know how to do this, but it probably needs to go through the FCA on. Japanese knotweed was found in the,
Yeah, we're on it.
it's a notifiable disease, I don't know if it's a notifiable disease, but you have to notify tendering, which I think they haven't done yet. The reason they haven't done that is because when the boat park was looked after the Harbour Commissioner, they told him, and the Harbour Commissioners did something about it, but it's not been effective. So I said, well, this time, because we now are the owner and manager of it, we should notify immediately. And then go back to the harbour master and ask him who he used, because it has to be done. I've spoken to Ben Smith about this, by the way, and he said it's, you have to bring in a specialist or
You
something.
do. But Chris, Terry's, I think you had a chat with Terry and he's on it. He's very keen to be able to get something out there sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
To follow the trail of, not blame, but to follow the trail of how they did it. And I'm not so sure they did it in the correct way.
Well, that's what I was keen to get something going on it, because Ben said that you can have a weed barrier between our ground and the holiday homes. And he said we should go down and find out if that's there quickly, because otherwise it will be going up.
I think that was
What's wrong with the common paraffin?
you can't burn it.
No,
Why?
It's
it's indestructible.
Is it?
Yeah, a friend of mine had it in his garden. It was terrible. They actually dug down 2 meters deep,
Yeah,
and
I
about
thought they'd lessened the
it could be a massive
restrictions
insurance.
on that, but I don't,
It's dreadful
it's
stuff.
brought down buildings apparently.
yeah.
Couldn't bear.
If it gets into the concrete. you
We've
know,
got it at the YMCA because the cottage next door, its garden is full of it. And that's been reported so many times to tendering.
No, they don't do anything.
And that's what made me think they do.
Well, I think
Down the-
what you've got to do now, Chris, is just talk with Tracy and Terry so that we get, I'm not using the word blame here, so that we get the process going as to how it was done.
Well, yes, I agree,
Terry's on to
but
it.
Ben Smith has given us the name of an expert that can get rid of it. And I wonder if we should get that going quickly, because if we can stop it doing any damage anywhere else, then we can stop the argument who's liable.
Yeah.
Completely.
Was that another question?
Yeah, well, we, in Colchester, in the Borough Transport, we had knotweed in the main vehicle park. And this is the time of year to hit it,
Right.
but in the growing season while it's active. And Sylvatic weed killer, we wiped it out.
Right.
But you have to do it while it's in this time of year.
That's great, yeah.
Well, I think maybe.
Let's get on with that then.
Yeah.
So we'll have a word with Terry as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Terry's got weed killers that we haven't got access to.
Yeah, but Terry apparently hasn't even got weed killers for this. He said,
No.
I can't remember what
He's
it
so
is.
restricted now on
Yeah.
what he's allowed to use, isn't he, out in the public?
That's why you have to be a specialist in.
Okay. Okay, it just remains me to thank you all for your help over the last 12 months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
It
Done a
was
great job.
new territory for me, so it was,
Can we record the updates from the committee to our chairman's?
Yeah, I think we should.
I'd also like to thank you for your obedience.
It's like being back at school.
And, thank you for your loyal visitors, and for not being too aggressive
Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
most of the time.
You're an asset to the council.
Okay,
You should be mayor, really, you should
Indeed.
be mayor.
yeah, meeting close, 55.
50 visitors.
Well
Good
done.
record, well done. We're moving on to this.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised when they were up there helping to.
Tracy,
East Ridge Council.
Oh, I
You
don't
wanted
know.
to have it for a while, don't you?
I haven't told her now,
And you haven't given her
so she won't know until
I'll ask you.
the finance, so she, anyway, that's it, Thursday.
Next, the youngest.
So,
Not we.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Malcolm.
you, Malcolm.
No,
It takes years, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but I
Water.
think we've seen it.
If you sold your house,
So, yeah, it's a
you
living
stuff,
thing.